I think the number one reason people don't start hiking is not knowing where to go. Where is everyone on social media going to get these incredible views? How did they find it? I didn't know either when I first started hiking, but over time I've built up a process to find good hiking trails that are right for my skill level, the weather, the time I have, and the vibe that I want on the hike. Choosing the right hiking trail starts with thinking about your fitness level and any other health concerns that might affect your hike. For example, I personally struggle with a super high heart rate and dizziness whenever I'm walking uphill. This doesn't mean I avoid trails with elevation. I just know that I need to factor in plenty of breaks, which will add to the time needed to complete the hike. Skill level is important too. If you haven't tried scrambling before, it's best to try it out on a trail that doesn't require you to scramble the whole way through, but more on that later. If you're hiking in the winter or any time after the clocks change, after summer, it's super important to make sure that the route you choose is close enough to you so that you can get there and do all of the hike while it's still daylight outside, unless you're planning on hiking at nighttime, which I wouldn't really recommend to beginners. One way you can narrow down your search is by filtering by types of hike, aka circular, out and back, and point to point. Not all hikes are created equal in terms of getting back to your starting point, so where you parked or where you got your public transport. I usually go for circular routes, which mean you get back to your starting point without having to backtrack on yourself like with out and back routes. This way you have new views throughout the whole hike, and it doesn't get boring. If you pick a point-to-point hike, you'll have to find your way back to your car/transport, which means more walking that you have to factor in. This is especially important to keep in mind in the winter, which, where I am in the UK, we have way less daylight than normal. Like if it gets to 3 p.m. and we have 10 more kilometers to do, it's not going to happen in the daylight. Now, scrambling, which I mentioned earlier, is a kind of in-between hiking and climbing. So scrambles don't necessarily require extra skills or any gear, but they do require a little bit more brain power and sometimes 3 points of contact. This means that when you have 2 feet on the ground, you'll have one hand holding you steady, or if you're taking a step, you'll have both hands keeping you steady. Grade 1 scrambles are the easiest and generally don't require a rope or a helmet in good weather. So these are the ones you'll want to try out if you're just starting out. They might sound a bit scary if you've never done any, but I personally find routes with scrambling so much more fun and actually a lot easier cardio-wise because they require you to slow down and think about where you're stepping, and it's more of a full body workout rather than just a super leg heavy workout. It also feels a bit like you're releasing your inner child and just like crawling over big rocks, which is fun. A good way to try out scrambling is to pick a forgiving route that has alternative ways of getting where you need to go, just in case you decide scrambling isn't for you. So now you know what to search for, but what do you actually use to do the searching? So for years and years and years, pre-internet, people have been using books and word of mouth to find hikes. But thanks to the internet, we now have apps like AllTrails and OS Maps, which can make it 10 times easier to find hikes near you and filter them down to the specifics of what we want them to be. They all have their own ways to classify different trails. AllTrails, for example, has difficulty ratings, which can be used as a good starting point. You should always take ratings like these with a pinch of salt, though. Trails can be difficult for lots of different reasons. A short trail could be really hard because of technicality or navigation, and a super long trail could be super easy because it's just a flat path. Another thing to note is that an easy trail in the summer could be completely covered in ice in the winter, making it really difficult and potentially dangerous. However, you can use things like the description, the tags, and the reviews, most importantly, to work out what you can kind of expect on the trail. For example, if you don't want to do anything super technical, you can search for dog friendly, and that will really narrow it down because most people don't want to be taking their dogs on scrambles. To give you an idea of what different things can make a trail more difficult or not, I'm going to use this book, which my brother gave me recently, which is Britain's Highest Mountain Walks by Jeremy Ashcroft. And it's really good because you can see it ranks each trail by strenuousness, navigation, technicality, and then it has another rating for scrambling and winter climbs. You can also see it goes really in depth into what these strenuous ratings actually mean and why different routes will be more difficult navigation-wise. And it also does the same for technicality with walking and scrambling. Luckily with things like AllTrails, the navigation is kind of covered, as long as you can download the trail or you have signal. I would recommend though that you do learn how to use maps and can kind of navigate yourself out of a situation, just in case, you know, in the event that all of your electricals end up dying. It's better to be safe than sorry. But strenuousness and technicality are definitely ones to look out for. I tend to really rely heavily on the reviews rather than the difficulty rating, especially going by most recent, because they give me a better idea of what I can expect on the trail at this time. It's also a great idea to look at any recent photos from the trail, either on the app or on social media, as this is the easiest way to tell if a trail is overgrown or flooded or completely covered in snow. A lot of these apps also have elevation maps, which can be super helpful when you're deciding which route to take. Sometimes they might be an indicator that you want to do the trail in reverse. Again, check the reviews. A lot of people will let you know if they found it easier to go the wrong way around a trail and why they found it that way. A lot of the times it can actually be easier to ascend the steep way because going on a steep downhill can be harder on your knees and, you know, you might be more likely to slip. Definitely check the reviews though, because you never know if it's only accessible one way. These elevation maps are also really helpful when you're actually on the trail, because you'll know when you need to conserve energy for a big uphill push, and you'll know when you can celebrate because you've done most of the uphills. Also, you don't need a fancy watch to start hiking, but it is a really good navigation tool. So if you get a Garmin or something similar, you can see a lot of this information like on your wrist without having to get your phone out, and it'll tell you stuff like whether you're on track. You can actually get a full map view if you download the map file from AllTrails or OS Maps, and yeah, it's just really helpful, especially in the winter when you might be wearing gloves, because then, you know, you don't have the whole touchscreen issue. If you're looking for something extra beginner friendly in the UK, you can check out the National Trust website. It's really good for searching for more accessible walks, which have great signage, established paths, and usually a lot of people around. So if you're worried about starting solo hiking, for example, just go for a few walks around some National Trust parks. These kinds of walks can be a really good confidence booster for someone who wants to start solo hiking, because you know that there's going to be lots of people around and you're in an area where you can get help if you need it. Just remember, you don't have to trek up 3,000 feet by yourself to get into hiking. You can work your way up to that if you want to, but for me, it's just about getting outside, getting moving, connecting with nature, and you can do that at whatever level you feel comfortable doing. Wherever you end up, don't forget to follow the 7 principles of Leave No Trace. You can check out my video about that in the description. So happy hiking, thanks for watching, I'll see you in the next one.